No, no,
Hello.
yeah.
One second,
Hey,
Patrick.
Patrick, how you doing?
Yeah,
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Doing
doing
good.
good. What do you want to
So
talk
what you
about? Sorry, John.
You're okay.
I think that purposeful design, like intelligent design, like if there was a god that did intelligent design, that everyone that was born would be capable of being successful, right?
I mean, maybe, but I don't know what you mean by successful because that seems to be like a very subjective thing. Success looks different for different people, so it kind of would depend on what you mean by success. But also, like as far as something being designed, like humans being designed, I guess you would mean that there would be no maybe mental deficiencies or intellectual deficiencies or any kind of physical ailments that would prevent us from succeeding in whatever kind of way. I would think that a god being omnipotent and omnipresent and omniscient, I would think that that god would be able to create people to where there are no like genetic diseases, mental defects, or intellectual disabilities. It seems rather odd that those do exist if God is the creator that Christians claim him to be, or well, creationists specifically.
Yeah, like you could just design agents with good desires, right? And certain faculties where they're always geared to being in accord with the good rather than, sin or the bad or something. And it seems like if God has these types of motivations with like people wanting to either do the good or in your case like being successful, there's like both kind of normative concepts, and that it's like what should success look like, what should the good look like. Well, if a being has that like ultimate desire of wanting the good and that's what's expected, right, it seems incompatible like when I look in a world and find people choosing bad things or something. The same way like if you had this being that wanted to like maybe not design things but wanted to destroy all chairs, right? It'd be very odd if I like walked in a room and saw a chair and I was under the impression that such a chair destroying god existed. It just seems like incompatible and not expected under that hypothesis. So I would say like vaguely with what you're saying, like I might agree, but you would have to get the theist to like sign off on some premises, like he's mostly rational, maximizes X wherever he can and those kind of things. But yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I mean, in the vague sense.
Well, I think that like with purposeful design, we would expect like the stuff on Earth to work really well. Like either everything or at least most things should be working well and beautiful. But like the creationists, they try to like they show the good parts of nature and they try claiming that's part of God. But when you show them that there's faults and things, they say it's sin.
Well, yeah, but I mean, people have this kind of, because like what they can kind of say or they can try to claim is that, well, look, like, this is why I said what I said earlier, which this is what's hard for me to wrap my head around, is that God is, this being that desires the agents and mind to do the good, and but he gives them this free will, and so ultimately it's up to them and they could go either way or whatever. But it seems kind of incompatible to me that like a god or someone that's this designer with mostly rational cognitive faculties, if you want to call them, would even create a scenario where agents could like create things that malfunction, or that it seems like incompatible with the nature of such a being, that you just wouldn't find those things the same way with a chair destroying god. You wouldn't find chairs in such a world, right? But I don't know if that answers you. I might have missed part of what you said. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, like the creationists and Christians, they always say, look how beautiful nature is, so there must be a God. But if you point out anything that seems to have faults or that comes out broken, they say it must be like sin that caused it. Like you could say like, who created you? Then they'll say God. You're like, no, really, who created you? God. Then they say, like, why did you create someone disabled? Then there's like, he didn't do it, it was sin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with that perspective, but I mean, to me, it's just kind of a cop-out response to just say, like, it's just like you're kind of creating safety nets everywhere you go for yourself, right? I mean, you're always going to be caught by this net when you chalk it up to sin or something. But I find that notion of sin to be incompatible with the type of gods that they believe in. I mean, for one part, it seems like such a being, a perfect being from my perspective. Like, you got to think prior to it creating anything, it exists in a perfect state, right? It's in a state of perfection, right? According to its properties. And there's nothing extrinsic from God, or there's nothing outside of God at that moment until he decides to create things. But it just, like, I get stuck, at least from the very kind of beginning here, which is, it doesn't seem like such a being would ever even make the steps to decrease the state of perfection, right? It seems like what's expected under such a being is that they're going to maintain the state of perfection, never letting that slip of perfection go, right? It seems totally incompatible. So all of this stuff that's kind of umbrellaed under that, like, I have like more of a, I guess, a philosophical issue in general, which is that the second you kind of give me these properties about it being perfect and stuff, like, you have to really redefine what you mean in order to get out of problems that I see, which is that such a being would never decrease the state of perfection. It just seems like analytically true, right? That a perfect being would maintain the state of perfection, right? That's what makes it perfect.
Yeah.
So sin and all that kind of stuff that you bring up just seems like wildly incompatible with such a being.
Well, I think like the reason why they blame it on sin is because they don't want God to look bad.
Right. Well, I mean, the very concept of sin makes God look bad, I think, because sin isn't really anything real, like in reality, or tangible in reality. Sin is basically transgressing like the opinions or the wants and needs, I say needs loosely there, of God, right? And so it all depends, like, what is sin depends heavily on your interpretation of what God wants and needs and commands of people. So it's a little hard to nail down the very concept of sin, but I feel that it's saying that, oh, all of this is because of sin, is ultimately saying, well, there's a magical reason for, all of these things to happen. And I'm just not convinced by magic, like, whatsoever. You first need to establish that magic exists and that magic actually has some kind of tangible effect in this world before I can even start to even consider sin as being a possible, like, explanation.
Yeah, because like the things in what they call in philosophy your ontology, right? The things that you think like exist, like, me and John are coming from a perspective where that's not part of our ontology, right? Like, we don't have those kind of things, and presumably you don't either. But one tactic when you talk to people is like, look, I don't share, when you categorize kind of the things that you believe in, like, we both believe cows exist and all these kind of things exist, but you kind of, you not only add a new quantity of things, you add like a new quality of, like, it's a new type of thing, a new kind of thing, right? This like immaterial, like atemporal kind of notion of a being that's not shared, with I guess what you would call my metaphysics, right? As a naturalist, that's not something that I would bring on. So to kind of John's point, like, one thing that you could do if you're talking with somebody is just say, look, like, I'm coming with a completely different background than you are. If I just think all there is the natural world, and you're kind of already assuming these supernatural stuff, you have like a lot of work to do. You kind of just show me why I should even think like this is even a possible candidate, to explain things around me, or that, like, what is it even we're even talking about, right? Like, I know what it means to create things temporally, but what does it mean to create the world or sin when God's, not temporally bound. Like that's a whole new usage. That's a whole new concept of verb usage, right? Atemporal verb usage and temporal verb usage. Not something that I need in my theory, right? Or my view of the world. And so like my kind of tactic on this is kind of honing it back to show them that look at how many things you have to postulate, that you have to add to your theory to make sense of the world around you, when all you could do is shave a lot of that stuff off, and you'll end up with my view, and it will explain it just as well, right? So I don't know if that's a tactic that interests you, but you can be like, more like inquisitive on their view and say, look, I need you to get me off the ground, and I just don't think magic stuff exists, right? It's kind of hard for me to accept when you say that's sin. That's just something I don't believe, right? I don't know if that helps. I'm sorry, Patrick. I'm trying to read between the lines a little bit and give you kind of advice there, if that helps, but probably not. I'm probably missing the mark.
Oh, so what do you think is the purpose of life without a God?
I don't think that there are what are called stance independent like norms. So like in English, I don't think that there's like anything of the following X should be done independent of what I think, right? Like if I go see Spider-Man or whatever movie, I don't think that like it makes sense to say, oh, you were actually wrong, Mike. You were out of accord with what you should have saw. Like you were the objective aesthetic value there was to see Batman instead of Spider-Man. I don't understand that. And similarly, I don't understand what it means for there to be reasons, right? Things that I ought do independent of the values that I have. It just makes no sense to me. That concept is as meaningless to me as talking about someone being taller without referentiality, right? It's like they're not taller than anybody. They're just taller. It's like, well, I understand what taller than means, but when you divorce it from referentiality, I'm not really sure what you're talking about. And similarly, when people talk about purpose talk and they divorce that from things that I believe in, my values, and it's just now this kind of untethered floating notion of purpose, that sounds as meaningless to me as saying John is taller. And when someone asks, oh, what's he taller than? I go, no, he's not taller than anything. He's just taller. Do you understand my concept? Nobody should understand that concept. It's meaningless, right? So I kind of don't think the concept of a purpose independent of what I think or a collective group think makes any sense. So there's no purpose. That's what I would say. There's my purposes.
Well, you don't think there's any purpose to life?
No, there's no reason to do anything other than what you value to do. I don't see like why that even makes sense.
Right. I feel like, Patrick, I feel like the thing that is not being said in this question is absolute. Like there's no absolute purpose, like some transcendental purpose to our lives for everybody. And I feel like that's a very religious concept because, religion, specifically Christianity, says that everybody's lives should revolve around pleasing God and putting God first and putting Jesus first and everything like that. And so in that way, it makes God like the everything in our life, and that should be the purpose of our life, is worshiping God. That's a very religious concept. As far as without religion goes, you're kind of free to figure out whatever purpose you want to in your life. It's going to be subjective to like you and your experiences and just you as a person in general. So everybody's going to have different purposes for their life. You just got to figure that out. And I mean, that's a harder answer, right? That's a more complicated answer than just saying God, but everything is a more complicated answer than just putting God in that gap, right?
Yeah, and you can actually have a conversation too. Like if John goes, Mike, like I know you don't share my purposes in life and stuff, but I know you value X, Y, and Z, and that seems totally counter towards like what you're moving towards, right? Like you care about well-being, but like, slapping the child when they grabbed Skittles when I told them no was, that you were out of accord with your purpose of like, humanism and treating people with respect and, not hitting them and stuff like that. Right. So you know, someone, despite the fact that there's no purpose in the world that they can show me I'm out of accord with, they can point out that I'm inconsistent with my own values. Now, someone could say, well, the values are arbitrary. No, I mean, there's brute psychological facts about me. I've never had to reason myself into, if you know, I've never seen this happen, but if I saw like a dog get kicked, why am I going with such a violent, philosophy's like tainted me with these like violent fucking scenarios. Jesus, I do need to see therapy, I guess. But if I walk out and I see like, you know, a dog get kicked, I don't reason myself kind of into that. Like I notice these like kind of brute psychological facts about myself. You know, and me and John, we share a nature, so we probably similarly feel ways about, you know, this. And I think because we share that nature, it's not like we're starting from this completely arbitrary kind of ground of what our purposes are. There's a lot of common values that we all hold brute without ever reasoning ourselves into it. Never reasoned myself into thinking kicking a puppy was wrong. I just intuit and I see that and I feel a way about it immediately, right? I feel disgust immediately. So I think we can build off of that. I think it's actually pretty much easier project than, well, my God's purpose is this purpose and he'll kick your God's ass. Like, you know, it just seems ridiculous to me. I hope that helps. I feel like I'm saying that all the time. Not getting any feedback from you, Patrick. I'm worried that I this break I took, I'm losing my steps here, man.
So what do you think of the idea of a God creating life with a specific purpose behind it?
John, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would have to get somebody to identify that purpose, right? And I feel like if you're talking to a Christian creationist, you're going to be talking about, you know, the God of the Bible, specifically the New Testament and the Old Testament. And if you're talking to like a creationist of Islamic type, then obviously that's going to be Allah, who the main purpose is to, you know, be reverent of that God, to worship that God, to do what that God wants. And so, I mean, as far as like everything being created for a purpose, I would think that you would need to define, you know, more components to that in order for me to like have like a meaningful position on it. But as far as everything having a purpose, just an absolute transcendental purpose, I don't see the I guess objective way that you can establish that, because it seems to me like more likely than not, there is life elsewhere in the universe, and is that life elsewhere in the universe beholden to the God that's very specifically revealed himself to a small section of the earth at a very particular point in time in human history? Like, and somehow all life has now has to like give reverence to that particular God that decided to reveal himself in such a very specific area at a very specific time. That seems incoherent to me. It seems unreasonable. And I would think that if you're arguing for a God that is reasonable, saying that, oh, he's very unreasonable in this way, but trust me, it's totally reasonable, that's not going to help you make your point, for me at least.
Yeah, there's like a massive value gap too. Like people talk about this is ought gap, like you can't get an ought from, you know, an is, but there's something that's like not noticed, I think, or some, that should be noticed a little bit more often or talked about more often, which is like this gap between my values and then what I should do. Like if we talk about this purpose that's independent of what I think and my values, like if I go to the purpose, you know, meter 9000 machine or whatever, and it spits out the purpose for me, and the purpose is for me to like throw my third child off the building. I'm doing it again, Mike. I'm doing it again. I am doing it again. Why? Philosophy, fuck you so much. Anyway, if it was some horrible thing, I'm just gonna say it because we're already at the dance. If I you know get this moral ought or purpose that I should throw the third child, I'm just not gonna do it. There's a gap between like what, you know, I ought do independent of what I think, which still is like gibberish to me. But if I can try to understand that concept, that I have reasons independent of what I think, I'm gonna look at that and go, I don't give a shit what the purpose meter 9000 machine says. I am not going to throw the child off. Like it would be no different if like a some entity came up to you and he calls himself, Zaglorian, and it gives you Zaglorian facts. Well, if the Zaglorian facts just vastly go against my values, I don't care if those facts are like objective facts of things that I should do. I'm not going to do them, right? Just not going to do them. So I think there's this massive gap between, like, even if there was some purpose, like, I'm interested on what the content of the purpose is, because it seems pretty impotent, right? It seems pretty vacuous. It seems pretty vapid, that if, it could be any proposition that I'm supposed to do. Well, I don't think it's going to be privileged to my values. It could just be something totally insane and horrible, like eliminate the human race or something. Well, I'm not going to do that, right? If that's the purpose that was reported to me, I'm not going to do it. So I think there's that notion too, that it's much better to have something that's not a detached purpose, as something that's actually grounded and, something that you can sink your teeth into, and something that it's cogent, right? It makes sense from the ground you build from, which is you, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know if that helps you. I think we got a new caller coming in, so I don't know if you want to ask another question before we move on to that caller, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, do you have anything else to talk about there, Patrick, or any other questions? Sorry, any other questions that you have for us?
So if there was purposeful design, you would think that everything, or at least most things in the world, would work well, right?
So I don't know about that. What I do know is that coming from an engineering perspective, we try to create everything so that, it works, and it works the way that it's intended. And I think that we would need to first be able to identify intent for things, but also we would expect the things to work as intended. And with humans, we can't, we don't know everything that could happen, or that could plague something, or that could do one thing or another. So, but we try to do our best to, do the whole risk management thing and try to figure out what is a risk in it. I would expect an omnipotent God, or an omnipresent God, or omniscient God rather, to be able to know everything that could happen and for it to work perfectly. But I'm not exactly sure if we would be able to know what working perfectly actually looks like. And so in that kind of way, I would be agnostic about it, agnostic as to whether or not something is working perfectly or is working as designed. The problem that I have with creationists out there is that they claim that something does work perfectly, or that it is operating perfectly, when it's very obviously, one, not, but also two, you don't know what working perfectly actually looks like. So that would be my contention with that particular proposition.
Our buttholes and mouths share the same tube. So perfect.
I know.
All right,
Patrick. I mean, let me ask you real quick. Do you think that everything should work perfect, or do you think, or like, do you know what working perfect would even be?
Yeah, I actually want to slap myself for not turning and asking you kind of on your view. So thank you for that, God bless, because I got to feel like an asshole now that I didn't ask you.
Well, I think that, I read from an AI bot that purposeful design is when things work really well.
Well, it depends on what well means, but also I wouldn't trust AI bots with complex philosophical questions like that.
As somebody who has tried to see what it spits out, it's really not its thing. It's really bad with propositional logic too, which kind of surprises me, but
yeah, well, and also what you're going to get is all of these bots. I'm not sure which one you tried, and it doesn't matter, but they're all specifically trained to do particular tasks, right? And like if you've got an LLM, which is probably what you're talking about here, if you got an LLM that's trained to be like a general kind of LLM, then you're not getting anything that's going to be specific to philosophy. So what you're going to end up probably getting is whatever it's been trained on and it comes to conclusions that way on what it's been trained, or it searches the internet, for what it is, which is no better than just you going out and searching the internet. It can just search a lot more things than you can in a few in a lesser amount of time. So
that's why I think AI is really bad with philosophy. Is a lot of the content is like you have to go buy a book. It's not, most of it's not just on the internet on a PDF file somewhere. I mean, you will find a lot of that, but it's kind of like, does it have a, knowledge and resentment? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that book is on a PDF. I don't think it is, but oh, my beanie fell. But yeah, so, I wouldn't trust that, at least. It's very good though, whenever I can't figure out something in my life and I realize how stupid I am. I'm like, ChatGPT, why am I so dumb? And I'm like, oh yeah, thank you.
Well, yeah, if you're wanting ChatGPT or any LLM to be able to like summarize a position for you, or like, or you could tell it like to make a compelling argument for one thing or another, it can do that. Whether or not it's going to be accurate, make sense, or be logically sound, that's a different aspect of it, because it's not exactly trained to be logically sound in that way. I mean, I've done many conversations with some LLMs out there, and I have to tell it like, no, you didn't do that right. Can you please do this right? And it's like, oh, you're totally right. I totally messed up, and all this other stuff. So I mean, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. You also have to be very specific, and you have to limit your chats. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but with LLMs, it does not have memory, right? Well, some of the products, they've integrated memory into it, but like as far as in your chat, when you're having a chat with an LLM, it does not have active memory that it's referencing. What it's actually doing is it's sending the entire chat back to the LLM for it to reprocess it, and then it will continue the conversation. So every time, at some point, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but at some point LLMs will actually break down, or they'll get super, super unreliable if the chat goes on long enough. And I know some of the chats, the LLMs will actually make you stop at some point. And that's primarily because of the fact that there's a limited amount of times that you can like go back and forth with it, depending on how extensive the answers are and how extensive your questions are and everything like that. So keep that in mind when you're interacting with it, that it's literally based on trained data, or it's doing internet searches that you can do yourself and then coming to some kind of conclusion. And it's not necessarily going to be logically sound or anything like that when it gives you the answer.
All right.
You got anything else for us, Patrick?
No.
Okay.
I am curious. I don't know if I heard this though. Did you say you do believe is your view that there's a purpose independent of what your values, goals, stances are? Is that your view? I didn't know if I heard that fully.
I was thinking it would be like that if there was a God, but I think that there's either no God, or if there is one, it's one that does not intervene in the world, like a deist God.
Sure. I will put some pushback on it, though, that I don't think even theism rescues this, in the sense that like what I'm concerned about is whether or not the purpose or these morals or any kind of these normative terms that we're talking about, whether or not they are stance independent or stance dependent. For brevity and just pure understanding, we can just say mind dependent versus mind independent. There are some problems with like using that terminology, I guess, that some people have a problem with, but I think everybody here understands what I mean by independent of a mind or dependent on the mind. In the case of theism, like you don't actually like create this scenario of a stance independent purpose. It might be independent of you, but I mean, so is like legislation in my town, right? It's independent of me, and I might be like, oh, I really want to not break that law. I like my freedom. But really what's going on is I have a mind dependent desire to not go to jail, to have my freedoms, right? These kind of things. And so there's prevailing desires and prevailing values that I have. But that's no different in the case of theism, if you think about it, that it's all going to be mind dependent or stance dependent on what God thinks, what kind of nature God happens to have out of all the natures God could possibly have. And so I don't think theism even actually gives you this view. I actually think that if anyone was going to take this view, it's, and me and John might disagree here. I think it's definitely religiously based and stuff, but I think when you actually look at this philosophically, the only attempt at a coherent notion of purpose is independent of what I think would be a type of atheism, that there are like values independent of what people think, like maybe they're embedded into natural objects. That's not my view. That's a lot of spookiness and weirdness, and I don't think I need those things to explain it. But that said, I think that that's a view an atheist could have. Right, Akil Bilgrami is a philosopher, and he has a external kind of value view, and he's an atheist. So it's a view that I think an atheist could have if I can make sense of it to my best ability, but it doesn't seem like a theist can unless they want to say the purpose is independent of God, kind of like a Euthyphro, and he just kind of looks to the purpose and then reports the purpose back to us. But that, you know, then God just seems like a pretty useless cosmic peeping Tom middleman, right? It doesn't seem like he's really doing very much. So I don't know if that helps, but I just wanted to give for you or the audience that I think if you're going to make that view compatible, it's probably going to be mostly compatible with atheism.
All right.
All right, Patrick. Well, if that's all that you have for us today, then we will let you go. I hope you have a great day and everything. And, you know, I hope you'll call in with more questions sometime.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Have a good one.
Oh, yeah, you too. So sorry. I didn't mean to. It takes a second for it to actually drop. So that's my bad there, Patrick.